It's genuinely baffling sometimes how just 100 ringgit can ignite such a fiery national debate.
It really is something, isn't it? You'd think any help, no matter the size, would just be welcomed.
Exactly. But then maybe this small amount, it actually shows a massive gap, a real chasm in how we see economic struggle and maybe how we see the government's job in all this.
That's a really interesting way to put it.
I mean, think about it. For some people listening, maybe 100 ringgit, well, it might barely cover dinner out or, half a tank of petrol these days.
It just disappears, yeah.
But for someone else, that exact same note could mean, I don't know, a whole week of basic groceries. Or maybe it eases the stress of getting school supplies together for their kids.
Completely different worlds, side by side.
Right. So this chat isn't just about the cash itself. It's more about what it stands for, who it really helps, and maybe if it's even the right tool for today's economy.
Yeah, the effectiveness question.
Yeah. So as we kind of unpack this, you really have to wonder, where do you fall on this? It's surprisingly divisive.
It really is.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. The government announced this one-off RM100 cash aid. It's for all Malaysian citizens aged 18 and up. Sounds simple enough.
Well, yes and no. It sounds simple, but the way it works is quite specific. It's not just cash in hand.
Okay. How does it work then?
So this is part of a bigger program, the Sumbangan Asas Rumah, or SARA program.
Right, Sarah. That's one for basic necessities for lower income groups.
Exactly. And this RM100 gets distributed electronically. It uses your MyCard, the national ID card. Think of it like a digital voucher.
Okay, so not physical cash, a voucher. And can you spend it anywhere?
No, that's the key thing. It's strictly for essential items only. They've got a network, quite a big one actually, about 4,100 participating stores and supermarkets across the country.
Gotcha. And is there a deadline?
Yeah, there's a specific window to use it. It starts August 31st and runs all the way through to December 31st, 2025. So quite a generous time frame.
And essentials. What kind of things are we talking about?
It covers a really wide range. They say over 90,000 items in 14 categories. So things like rice, eggs, cooking oil, household cleaning stuff, even basic medicines and school supplies, really focusing on those core needs.
Okay, that makes sense. Aiming it directly at basic needs through that voucher system. And the scale of this is pretty massive, right?
Huge. It's designed to reach 22 million citizens.
22 million people, wow.
Yeah, and the government's allocated RM2 billion specifically for this particular handout.
2 billion ringgit. That's a significant amount.
It absolutely is. And the government's justification for it, their core argument, is very clear. They've basically said, look, don't belittle this, don't trivialize it.
Right. That was a strong message, wasn't it? The don't belittle it line.
Very strong. They acknowledge that, yes, for high-income earners, people making maybe RM 20,000, RM 40,000 a month, RM 100 might seem small. Peanuts, even.
Yeah, that peanuts word came up a lot from the other side.
It did. But the government insists its actual value, its real worth, is significant for rural communities and for low-income groups, the B40.
Can you give us an example of how that adds up?
Sure. They gave this example. Think of a household, say, a married couple with 2 adult children. If all 4 are eligible, they collectively get RM400 from just this one initiative.
Okay, RM400. That's more substantial.
And then if you combine that with other existing aid, like the Sumbangan Tunai Rama STR cash aid, well, their total support could go up to maybe RM700.
Right, so it stacks up with other programs.
Exactly. And this specific RM100 boost also increases the total SARA program budget for 2025 from RM 13 billion up to RM 15 billion.
So it's part of a wider increase in that kind of support.
Correct. And they also made a point of saying any funds from this RM 100 handout that don't get used by the deadline, well, they won't just disappear. They'll be put back into the pot and redistributed in future programs for those who need it most.
Okay, so that covers the government's perspective pretty clearly. A targeted boost, part of a larger plan aimed at those who feel it most. But public reaction wasn't quite so straightforward, was it?
Not at all. Almost immediately, you saw this wave of skepticism and quite a bit of criticism, really.
What was the main thrust of that criticism?
A lot of it, often quite sarcastically put online, was this feeling that, after all the buildup, all the hype, it was only peanuts. That phrase just kept coming up.
Only peanuts.
Right.
Directly challenging the government's don't belittle it stance.
Precisely. And there was this other strong argument doing the rounds that just cutting the sales and service tax, the SST, by maybe 1%, That would actually help people more, and more consistently than a one-off RM100.
That's interesting. Focusing on tax policy versus direct aid, what was the thinking there?
Well, many critics framed these cash handouts as populist measures,
Popular.
meaning they see them as maybe short-term vote winners, ways to make people feel good temporarily, rather than policies that actually build the economy long-term, fix structural problems. The feeling was it's just flashing cash on the streets.
Right. Style over substance, in their view.
Kind of. And someone shared a very specific example that really seemed to resonate. They calculated their rent had gone up by RM 1,600 a month, partly due to SST effects.
1,600 a month. Wow.
Yeah, and then they compared that to the small petrol price cut that happened around the same time, 6 cents off per liter. They figured on their typical RM 200 petrol bill, that saves them maybe RM 6 a month.
Oof. Yeah, that puts the RM100 or even the RM6 in a very different light compared to a RM 1,600 rent hike.
Exactly. It highlights just how different the pressures are and the feeling that the aid just wasn't touching the sides of the real cost increases people were facing.
And it wasn't just the RM100 aid itself that drew criticism in this context, right? Other things got pulled in too.
Absolutely. For instance, the announcement of new public holidays, like making September 15th an extra holiday for Malaysia Day.
People complained about a public holiday. That seems unusual.
Well, the criticism came mainly from the business side, particularly small and medium enterprises, SMEs. Their argument was that extra holidays mean lost productivity, lost income for the employer. It costs them money.
Ah, okay. The business impact.
Right. So the overall call from these critics was for better economic policies, not economic goodies. They wanted things like income tax deductions, maybe lower interest rates, things they see as more fundamental fixes.
More structural changes, less direct cash.
Precisely. There was even this comment calling the government's approach somewhat schizophrenic.
Schizophrenic. How so?
Well, the observation was, 1 minute the government is talking about people abusing petrol subsidies and the need for targeted subsidies, and then the next minute they announced cheaper petrol for everyone. It seemed contradictory to some.
I see the point. Sending mixed signals, perhaps.
Yeah. And underneath a lot of this criticism was a deeper worry that ultimately the bill will be sent to the rakyat, the people, and paid by them. Basically, questioning if these were real reforms or just temporary measures that taxpayers would eventually have to fund without fixing the underlying issues.
So a sense that it might be a short-term gain for long-term pain, or just kicking the can down the road.
That was definitely a sentiment expressed. Some suggested these announcements felt more like sales tactics aimed at winning votes rather than genuine economic strategy.
Okay, so some pretty sharp criticisms there.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just criticism, was it? People also started suggesting alternatives.
Yes, and that's where the conversation got quite constructive in some ways. Beyond just saying this isn't enough or this isn't the right way, there were concrete proposals.
Like what? What were the main alternatives put forward?
One really interesting idea that gained traction was the opt-out suggestion.
Opt out, meaning people could refuse the RM100.
Exactly. The proposal was simple. Give people who feel they genuinely don't need the RM100 a clear, easy way to say, no thanks.
And what was the point of that? What would happen to the money?
The argument was powerful. That money, the returned RM100s, could then be specifically channeled into areas seen as more critical and chronically underfunded. Education and health were the top mentions.
Okay, so redirecting the funds based on individual choice, did they have specific ideas for health and education?
They did, very specific. For healthcare, a major suggestion was tackling the huge backlog for elective surgeries in government hospitals. We're talking about estimates of 15,000 patients facing waits of up to 21 months.
21 months? That's a long time to wait for surgery.
It's incredibly long. So using the opted-out funds to reduce that waitlist was a key suggestion. For education, the idea was to fund scholarships for deserving students, top performers in SPM, STPM, matriculation, who still sometimes get denied places in the university courses they want.
Right, addressing those gaps in opportunity.
Yes. And related to healthcare, there was also a call to abolish something called the RACAN KKM scheme.
What's that?
It's a scheme critics argue is unfair, potentially biased, allowing some people to essentially jump the queue in public hospitals by leveraging private healthcare connections. So abolishing that was part of the call for a fairer system, potentially funded by these opt-out contributions.
And did anyone famous back this opt-out idea?
Yes, quite notably, a prominent public figure actually offered publicly to be the first one to give their RM100 back if the government set up an official opt-out system. They even suggested high-ranking officials, politicians, should probably do the same.
Wow, that's quite a statement. Leading by example.
It definitely added weight to the proposal. It framed it as an act of solidarity, letting those who can afford it contribute directly to vital public services.
That's a really compelling alternative vision. But we should also bring it back, shouldn't we? Back to the original point that for many people, that RM100 isn't trivial at all.
Absolutely crucial to remember that balance, because while the opt-out idea has merit for some, we have to circle back to the reality that, yes, RM100 might feel like peanuts to someone well off. But for a family in the B40 group, maybe budgeting just RM5 for a meal, that same RM100 means 20 meals.
20 meals. Yeah, when you put it like that.
It makes a massive difference. It's food on the table. It's
Yeah.
relief from immediate pressure. So the value is just perceived completely differently depending on where you stand economically.
Okay, let's zoom out a bit then. Because this RM100, as you mentioned, wasn't announced in isolation, was it? It came as part of a bigger package.
That's right. It's important to see it in context. It arrived alongside several other initiatives aimed at easing cost of living pressures.
What else was in that package?
Well, for one, there was a postponement of toll rate hikes on 10 major highways. That's a direct saving for millions of commuters every day.
Okay, that's quite tangible for many people.
Definitely. And then there was the fuel price cut we touched on earlier. The RM95 petrol price was reduced to RM1.99 per liter, down from RM2.05.
The 6N reduction.
Yes. And the government really emphasized that this was fulfilling an earlier promise, kind of linking it back to their mandate.
And you mentioned there was a catch with that fuel price.
Sort of. They made it very clear this lower price was only for Malaysians. Foreign nationals would have to pay the full, unsubsidized market price.
Preventing fuel tourism, basically.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
They pointed out that fuel is much more expensive, like over RM2.50 a liter, in neighboring countries like Singapore, Thailand, Indonesia. So it was about targeting the subsidy.
Okay, so toll freezes, cheaper petrol for locals, the RM100 aid. What was the overall message from the government with these combined measures?
The consistent message was an acknowledgement that, yes, the cost of living is still a real challenge for many Malaysians, and these steps were framed as a, quote, gesture of appreciation from the government to the people, trying to show they're listening and responding.
But how does that square with the bigger economic picture? Is the economy struggling badly, or are things actually okay according to the stats?
And that's the really interesting, almost contradictory part, because on one hand, the government points to some quite positive official numbers,
Like what?
like inflation being at a 4-year low, just 1.1% back in June, and unemployment hitting a decade low, around 3%.
Okay, low inflation, low unemployment. Those sound pretty good on paper.
They do, but then you have this widespread public feeling, this frustration that everyday costs are still rising, that people aren't feeling those good numbers in their wallets.
The disconnect between the stats and lived reality.
Exactly. And it seems that despite these various relief measures and the positive headline figures, public support for the government remains described as fragile. Even with a decent approval rating around 55% earlier in the year, there's this underlying sense of economic anxiety that the measures perhaps haven't fully addressed.
So we've really looked at this RM100 from all sides, haven't we? We've seen the government's view a crucial lifeline, not to be underestimated, and then the public reaction for many, a symbol that maybe doesn't quite hit the mark, doesn't tackle the bigger economic headaches. It really does show those vastly different viewpoints in society.
It really does. And what's fascinating, I think, is how economic policy, even something that seems relatively minor, like this RM100, it becomes a kind of mirror.
A mirror reflecting what?
Reflecting our societal values, maybe. That constant balancing act between giving immediate help now versus investing in long-term changes for the future. And it forces us to ask that fundamental question. What does enough actually mean when a government tries to support its people?
That is a great point. Which leads to a final thought, maybe for you listening. When you're facing economic pressure, what do you think is more impactful? Is it that direct, immediate help, even if it feels small? Or should the focus be entirely on those big structural reforms, the ones that might take years to show results? What really stands out to you about trying to strike that difficult balance?